Thank you for watching Concord United on YouTube. Don't forget to hit subscribe so you can stay up to date with our latest videos. If you'd like to learn more about our church, please visit our website at concordunited.org. We hope you will take advantage of our many opportunities to share Christ, serve others, and grow in faith.
Love all the different versions of the Gospels and the way these different Gospel writers see different things and give us this full picture of who Jesus was. Luke, we think, was a physician, and we know that he wrote with more detail than a lot of the other writers did. Wrote from more of a Gentile perspective as opposed to a Jewish perspective, like Matthew did, for instance. And Luke's gospel contains 2 or 3 of those iconic stories that a lot of people know if they didn't even know they were from the Bible. The story of the Good Samaritan, of course, is found in Luke. And this story today is perhaps one of the more polarizing of the, just what we need is more polarization in our culture right now. But it really is, because it has 3 main characters, a father, a younger, and an older son. And sometimes people will side with one or the other, and sometimes people can feel very strongly about it. So we'll see what you think. I believe that the father in this story is really an example of the way God treats us, and many of the attributes of the father in the story are attributes of God. But the sons, the younger son and the older son, I know there's a lot of that younger one in me and some of the other too, and maybe you'll find yourself relating to one or the other. I don't know. Before I read it, I do want to add just a word of context, because it's always helpful when you're studying a passage to see what's the context, it comes just before it, what comes after it, and particularly in this case, what comes before it. And I want to go all the way back. We're going to be in chapter 15 of Luke today. If you go all the way back to chapter 9, there is this one verse that if the book of Luke had a hinge, this would be the hinge that it swings on, because Jesus has obviously, we've been through the beautiful birth narrative that he offers, and then Jesus begins his work and ministry and his preaching and his teaching and his healing. And in chapter 9 and verse 51, he makes a decision. Now, Jesus all along knew that he was headed for the cross, but there came a point at which it was time to start moving that way. And so in chapter 9, verse 51, it says this: as the time approached for him to be taken up to heaven, and of course that's code for die on the cross, Jesus resolutely set out for Jerusalem. Jesus made a conscious decision that it was time to move toward the cross and begin that journey. Now, we are not called to go to the cross, but we will on many occasions be called to go to a crossroads where we're going to have decisions to make about who we're going to follow and how we're going to follow and how far we're willing to go to follow Jesus. And in fact, the passage just before this one, at the end of chapter 14, is very explicit about that. Some people are traveling with Jesus. He's amassed an entourage. He's got a posse at this point, and they're with him up to a point. But he realizes that many of them have no idea what they're getting into and what following him will ultimately cost. And in fact, to try to describe the cost of discipleship, the passage just before this one is where he famously tells them, unless you're willing to hate your mother and father, you can't follow me. And we hear that and we go, man, that's rough, Jesus. Are you serious? And of course he was serious, but he was also exaggerating. He doesn't want us to hate our mother and father, really. But what he does want us to do is put him first. And that's what he meant with that little bit of exaggeration. What Jesus is asking the people to do, and what he's asking us to do, is to make a decision to go all in, all the chips in the middle of the table, and trust Jesus with the rest of it, because that's the only way we can follow him. And in this story that I'm going to read, one of the ways that we find ourselves facing this cost of following Jesus may involve relationships. And it may involve our interactions with people that are close to us and maybe aren't close to us. But relationships are a way that we can choose to follow Jesus and choose to operate out of a perspective or a reality of compassion as opposed to selfishness that can lead to issues. So let me read the passage now. This is one of three that are together. If you're into art, think of this as a triptych, where you have these three pieces of art that aren't exactly alike, but they all have a common theme. That's kind of what this is like. One of the stories before this one is about someone who was missing a valuable coin, and they swept their house until they found it. And then the second story is about a shepherd who left his 99 sheep that he had found to go after that one that was lost. And then we have this story as part of these three stories that go together. And remember, Jesus was making these stories up as he went to address the issues at hand. And today I believe he's trying to teach us about compassion and what it costs to have the kind of compassion that the Father applies to us if we are going to apply that to other people. So now, let me read the passage to you. This is Luke chapter 15, beginning in verse 11. Jesus continued, "There was a man who had 2 sons. The younger one said to his father, 'Father, give me my share of the estate.'" Now, let's pause. Let's pause for a minute. Now, of course, this in the story, this was implied to be a Jewish man. Jesus was, after all, a Jew. And so this was a Jewish man and his Jewish sons. And first of all, a younger son would never ask for the inheritance ahead of the older son. And second of all, neither one of them would ever ask for an inheritance while the dad was alive. It was insulting. Deeply insulting. So we're starting off with that. The younger one said to his father, "Father, give me my share of the estate." So he divided the property between them. Not long after that, the younger son got together all he had, set off for a distant country, and there squandered his wealth in wild living. After he had spent everything, there was a severe famine in that whole country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to a citizen of that country, who sent him to his fields to feed pigs. Pause again. Remember, Jewish folk, they don't like pork. They don't eat pork. It's a matter of law, and they certainly don't want to have anything to do with pigs. And so Jesus is trying to make this look as bad as he can. I mean, he is really painting with very deep colors as he paints this picture. So this young man has fallen on such hard times that the only job he can get is feeding the pigs. He longed to fill his stomach with the pods that the pigs were eating, but no one gave him anything. When he came to his senses, he said, "How many of my father's hired servants have food to spare, and here I am starving to death? I will set out and go back to my father and say to him, 'Father, I've sinned against heaven and against you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your servants.' So he got up and went to his father. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion for him." Okay, hit pause again. So this father, not only was he not insulted like he should have been, but he was apparently looking out the window, maybe walking out on the porch, looking up and down the road, hoping his son was going to come back. And it says he was filled with compassion. If you have a Bible, underline that. If you don't, just highlight it in your head. Filled with compassion. That's huge. He ran to his son. Hit pause again. No. Jewish dads didn't go running after their kids because they wore robes. They'd had to have hiked them up to run, and it was indignant. He would not have done that. Or it would have been beneath his dignity. He would have never done that. But this father did. So it said he ran to his son, threw his arms around him, and kissed him. The son said to him, "Father, I've sinned against heaven and against you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son." But the father said to his servants, "Quick, bring the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Get the chacos. Bring the fattened calf and kill it. Let's have a feast and celebrate. For this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found." So they began to celebrate. And everybody lived happily ever after. Not so much. The story is not over. Good so far, though, right? Now, let's keep going. Meanwhile, the older son was in the field. When he came near the house, he heard the DJ and saw the dancing, and he called one of the servants and asked what was going on. Okay, it didn't say DJ, I just made that up. "Your brother has come," he replied, "and your father has killed the fattened calf because he has him back safe and sound." And the older brother said, "That's awesome." And he busted a move right there and headed for the keg. No, that's not what happened. In fact, the older brother became angry and refused to go in. So his father went out and pleaded with him. There's a little unwritten compassion in the story the father's got toward the other one as well. But he answered his father, "Look, all these years I've been slaving for you and never disobeyed your orders, and you never gave me even a young goat." I love that. Not a fattened calf. You didn't give me a scrawny little goat so I could celebrate with my friends. No DJ, no keg, no nothing. But when this son of yours who has squandered your property with prostitutes comes home, you kill the fattened calf for him. He's a little mad. And you can sort of see his point. "My son," the father said, "you're always with me, and everything I have is yours. But we had to celebrate and be glad because this brother of yours was dead, and he's alive again. He was lost and is found." I don't know what happened to the older brother. I have in my mind worked out how this all turned out. But I'm wondering, as you listen to the story, who you related to. Who did you find yourself leaning toward? Did you see a little bit of older brother in you? You see some younger brother in you? How do you feel about the way the dad treated the younger brother? I mean, these are important issues. The church I served before this one, we had a parishioner there who was older. He was retired and was a great man. Loved him to death. He had everything he had. He had built with his own two hands and had done well in life. Put himself through college, and he was a hard worker. And I was doing a disciple Bible study, and we were studying this story. And we read the story. And we were talking about all this, and at one point he just slammed his Bible shut. And he said, "This is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. If I had been that father, I would have run that young boy off with a 2x4. The nerve of him coming back to the house. The older brother was right. He shouldn't have been allowed to come back like that. This is crazy." And the fact is, he was right. It is crazy. But this is kingdom stuff. This is the way it works in the kingdom of God. And sometimes what it costs us to follow Jesus are those feelings we have where it's like, nah, this person made their bed. They can lay in it. Wait, what about mine over here? Whoa. How come I'm not getting what I should get? And this person over here that doesn't deserve anything is getting stuff that I should have. Those kinds of feelings, sometimes that can be what it costs us to follow Jesus. So hold all that in tension and let's move forward for a couple minutes, because there are two things going on in this story that happen to all of us. And I'm thankful that there is this compassionate Father in heaven that deals with us. Let me show you what I mean. Freedom. Freedom is one of the dynamics in this story that sometimes gets overlooked. Freedom. God gives us freedom. The father gave the younger son freedom. He could have said, "No sirree." That's what my dad would have said to me. "No sirree, young man. I'm not giving you a penny, and you're not leaving this house, and particularly to go off into some wild country and do all sorts of crazy, stupid things." If only my father had stopped me from doing that, but he didn't, and I've got a few scars to show from it. But that's my problem. But no, the father said, "Okay. Here you go." And he gave him his inheritance and let him go. And it was this beautiful gift that he gave to his son. He gave him the freedom to spend it. And God gives us the same freedom. We have this freedom. We have this freedom to use the gifts that God has given us. We can either use them for Him, we can use them for good, to help other people, to help ourselves, to build a foundation for life, or we can squander them. We can squander our freedom. And I don't know about you, but I could tell stories all day about times that I squandered my freedom that God gave me. And God gave you freedom as well. Freedom's like fire. Freedom is like fire. We can keep ourselves warm, or we can burn down the house. Depends on what we choose to do with it. And this is part of this compassionate love of the Father. God loves us so much, He gives us freedom and autonomy and says, "Okay, I'm hoping you're going to do the right thing here, but I'm going to give you the freedom to go make choices and do your thing." Sometimes it works out well. Sometimes it doesn't. When it doesn't, that brings up the second dynamic in the story that I want to lift up, that is sometimes holds us back from the kind of compassion God calls us to have, and that is accountability. This was my parishioner from the other church. This was his issue. He needs to be held accountable. He isn't being held accountable for what he did. His father gave him his inheritance, and he went out and squandered it, and he's just going to let him come back like nothing ever happened. Well, hold on. The boy was in a pig lot without even pig food to eat because of his bad choices. Accountability? Oh yeah. Yeah, he was held accountable all right. It's just that the father wasn't going to pile on. The father didn't ever say that what he did was okay. But the father saw what the result was and chose to act out of a place of compassion and say, how can I help? Not, you made your bed, now lay in it. Accountability can be tough, but compassion overcomes that desire to see people have to pay. I want you to pay. Now, that doesn't mean that people should be allowed to do anything and everything's okay. That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm talking about kingdom realities here. God is not going to just keep punishing us after we've already punished ourselves. I'm sure I've told the story about my younger daughter, Christy. She was about 3 years old. She had this little side ponytail, we called it. And Lynn trimmed her hair, but she let this one little ponytail grow, hung down the side all the way to her shoulder. And it was kind of her identity, her little side ponytail. Well, she got a hold of some scissors, and that never works out well. And we told our girls, don't ever pick up a pair of scissors if mommy and daddy aren't there. Because one, you might cut yourself, and two, you may do something you can't undo. And she did. And she just decided she would snip that side ponytail off right down to the scalp. And Lynn came in and saw it. And so what does Lynn do? Wait till your father gets home. Okay. So I get home, and Lynn had called me, and she said, you're not going to believe what Christy did. And I was kind of angry. About it, because she shouldn't have had the scissors. So I get home, and there's Christy in her room, sitting on her bed, and her eyes are swollen and red. She'd been crying all day, dreading me coming home. And I walked in, and I saw her there, and she's sitting on the bed. And she looked at me and she just started sobbing again. And I thought, you know what? What could I possibly do to make her feel worse than she feels? And why would I want to do that? She knows she messed up. I just sat down on the bed, picked her up, put her in my lap, and just hugged her. And we kind of rocked back and forth for a while. And I patted her back, which is, I still do that to the grandkids. I just patted her and said, I love you, honey. And that's what God does for us. We hold ourselves accountable. Accountability will find us. We don't have to be the accountability police, but sometimes that happens with people with whom we disagree, people who've made mistakes, and we might even be in a position to help at some point, like the older brother was. But no, wait a minute, this isn't fair. Well, no, it's not fair. It probably isn't fair. But guess what? Life isn't fair sometimes. And there's nowhere in the Bible that it says everything's always going to be fair. And to tell you the truth, the last thing I want God to do, the very last thing I want God to do is to treat me fairly. Because if he treated me fairly, I'd be long gone, a smoldering heap, zapped by a lightning bolt from heaven, if he treated me fairly. I don't want to be treated fairly. I need grace. I need compassion. And so do other people. And I think Jesus is trying to teach us that here. Accountability. Accountability is when reality finds our hiding place. And it will, won't it? Every time. It takes time sometimes, but it will. And God's up there ready to go, okay. Let's move on. So, what is that? What causes that? How does God manage to treat us that way? That's I told you, underline that part of where it says he was filled with compassion. That's what drives his whole story. God is filled with compassion. I looked at compassion. I looked up in the dictionary, and I looked at the opposite of compassion to kind of see what that said. And it said animosity, mercilessness, hatred. And most of us don't I don't think, we may have a little animosity, particularly when we open up Facebook and we see some of that stuff. But most of us are not merciless. Most of us are not hateful people. But there's one other word that describes the opposite of compassion. This one stung me a little. And you know what it is? Indifference. Indifference is the opposite of compassion. The older brother, he was struggling with a little indifference. Hey, what about me? Forget the boy. He got his and blew it. What about me? Compassion is whenever we blow off, we don't consider indifference. Compassion is whenever people do make a difference. Situations make a difference, and we can step in and help. Compassion is when we let God guide our heart and not our emotions. And you know what? In seeing the kingdom reality, it lets all the political pressure off, because there's no red, there's no blue, there's no liberal, there's no conservative, there's none of that. Now, we all can have our viewpoints and should and hold to them. That's great. But when we're talking about kingdom things and the way people are treated in the kingdom, we always have to come from God's perspective. And it's all level. No color, no red, blue, liberal, conservative, none of that. It's all just even. And we let God then guide our heart and not our feelings that are based on other perspectives. And suddenly we find ourselves showing compassion even to people that we could just slap, but we wouldn't, but we could. You know what I mean? We're so angry. But compassion compels us. That's that cost. That's that cost. That's what it cost us. When Jesus says it costs something to be a disciple, that's one of the things it costs us. We have to be willing to unclench our fists. Not to say that anything and everything people do or believe is okay. I'm not saying that. But I'm saying that we unclench our fists and we choose to treat people with compassion. And that's hard, and it hurts sometimes. But the cross hurt too. And that was Jesus' choice when he set out resolutely to go to Jerusalem. He wants us to set out and follow him. It's not easy. It's not supposed to be. But it's what Jesus wants for you and me. And if we do that, we find ourselves closer to him than we ever felt. It's about living out of a place of compassion. It happens, and it can happen with our hands and our feet, and not just our attitudes. In fact, let me just show you what compassion looks like. Watch this.
This is day one of the 2022 Mission Blitz. First crop drop, we're doing over 25,000 pounds of sweet potatoes. We're going to do another one tomorrow. We've got 22 projects this weekend. It's going to be great. We're getting so much work done and helping so many people.
We're making cards for people that maybe don't get a daily interaction with someone, and someone in our community turned 100, and that's a big accomplishment. So we're just trying to show her some love. God's love.
We are at the thrift store renovations today for Mission Blitz, and when we first saw the list of all the activities and projects coming up, we couldn't be more excited for this one. We are Cedar Bluff people, and the need for a Cedar Bluff thrift store is great. We have so many people in our community who could use a place where they can buy inexpensive clothing, housewares, whatever that they need, and this is the perfect location.
For Mission Blitz this year, I worked at the new thrift store that they're building on Kingston Pike, helped Jane move furniture so we could put it into the thrift store, and help run these boxes over here so that we can get some food to communities in need. And I'm glad that the church is, got capabilities. We're big enough to be able to do stuff like this to help the community. It's really cool.
Here at Concord United, we're working in our own community as well as communities around the world. So we have people here who are putting together food packets.
We have an assembly line here. We're mixing up cinnamon apple oatmeal through Operation Inasmuch, and we will call up local pantries, several local pantries, to come and pick these up.
Believe it or not, we really do have people who don't have a hot breakfast or don't have any food in the evening. So we're putting together food packets that we can deliver through local food pantries to people in our own community.
We love oatmeal!
Our 4th Mission Blitz in a row.
I love being able to give back where I can, and I really appreciate the mission of this project, and I'm just excited to help out where I can.
Tammy and I have been doing this every year that we've been having the Mission Blitz, and we find this to be a really rewarding way to reach out to local people in the community.
Mission Blitz! Mission Blitz!
Younger brothers, they were on the receiving end of all of that compassion, probably some older brothers too. And our job is to simply serve. Jesus said, serve. If there's a need, if somebody's hungry, if they're thirsty, if they're cold, if they're lonely, serve them. And so we serve them. And that's the way we get back to this God who is so compassionate toward us, the one who gave us freedom. And when we squandered the precious gift of freedom, he didn't hold us accountable because we'd already held ourselves accountable. We learned what we could learn from it, and he wants us to learn from our mistakes. But he wants us to move forward, and then he wants us to respond with compassion in response to the compassion he's shown us. So I pray that we find a way to do that. We don't have to wait till next year's Mission Blitz. This church can get you involved later this afternoon if that's what you want to do, or tomorrow or the next day. There's always work to be done. That's our job. That's the cost of discipleship, is to be willing to offer that compassion to whomever, understanding that it's flowing out of the compassion that we've received, and we just let it flow through us and to somebody else. Amen?